This discovery of the circus is a really special thing, not only for Colchester but for Britain, because it's the only one found in the country. The reason why we were on the site was because the army are rebuilding their garrison, and we were employed by the builders, Taylor Wimpey, to excavate and explore before they built their houses. And we expected before we began to find lots of burials, because in the Roman period you were not allowed to bury where you lived. So what they used to do was they'd bury hundreds, thousands of people would be buried just outside the Roman town, and that's where we were digging. And we did find lots of burials, hundreds of them. Then we started to find foundations of a Roman building. We first of all found some remains in one patch. We then moved on to another patch which was about 70 metres away, and we found foundations which were very similar to the ones we'd found in the previous patch, but it was 70 metres away, which is too far away, really, we thought, for one building. Now remember, by this stage, nobody had ever found a Roman circus in Britain before. In fact, the archaeological world was resigned at this stage to never finding one in Britain. It was thought Britain was too far out, too much on the edges of the Roman Empire to be into things like Roman circuses. We were then asked to move to another site, which was about 300 metres to the west. And lo and behold, we then discovered more of the same foundations. Except this time we found a long stretch of foundation which had these projections on the south side, which we know are buttresses to stop the thing falling over, and it lined up exactly with one of the two bits we'd found previously, about 300 metres away. The same wall and exactly the same alignment. So what was it? We actually discovered some gravel. In the Roman world, when you find packed gravel, at least around here, that's generally speaking a Roman road. So we thought we'd found a Roman road. So we've got the Roman road and these three patches of foundations. Now we just uncovered this long stretch when Taylor Wimpey, the developers, decided it was time to get some PR. So we said, well, because obviously we're full of it, we said, well, obviously we found this very interesting foundation which is about 350 metres at least long. And he sort of looked and said, no, that's not that interesting. Can you come up with something better than that? So we sort of scratched our heads and we thought, well, we have been finding these burials because we had, as I said before, we expected to find them, and we'd actually by that stage dug about 300 or 400 of them, which actually were very interesting for various reasons. So we said, well, we have got all these burials, and he said, no, burials don't sell houses, that's no good. Have you got anything else? And we said, oh, nothing else really. Well, I suppose we have got this gravel which we think is a Roman street, a Roman road. And he said, nah, that's not any good either really. And there was a kind of silence. I remember it so clearly. And then he said, what you need to find a chariot on that Roman road. And that was it, a chariot on the Roman road. Wow, fantastic. Roman circus, that's what it must be. And the more we looked, and the more we compared with what we'd found, the more it became apparent that we really had found a Roman circus. So really, the race was on then to prove it. I can tell you it was very stressful because we had to get out there if we could, keep quiet about it, and do some more digging. So we then started to plan out a series of little excavations based on circus plans elsewhere. To first of all try, what you do is you model the data, you try and predict where you should find foundations, and then you go and dig there. It's not like finding treasure, digging a hole and looking down the hole. It's actually very exciting because it is a sort of cerebral exercise. The circus itself is a long, elongated plan. So you've got the starting gates at one end, and then they race up this long arena around a thing which we call the central barrier, and they do it 7 times. Now at either end of that central barrier, you got what was referred to as a turning post, which is actually in the form of 3 massive cones, about 7 metres high. Now what Taylor Wimpey had to do involved uncovering underneath one of the modern roads where there should be, if our model was right, the end of the turning, one of the central barrier. And when they uncovered it, lo and behold, heap of rubble. When we cleared the rubble, we saw this fantastic remains of part of one of these huge cones, actually under the street. Also in the middle of the central barrier, if you look at other circuses, you will find they have typically have a massive monument. Generally it's an obelisk. Now circuses and the running of circuses round and round is seen to be a reflection of what happened in the sky. Because in the sky in the Roman world you had the sun was the chariot god, and the moon was a chariot goddess. So it's seen a mirror running round the central barrier, is seen as a mirror of that. And what they would do is they'd have in the middle of the central barrier an obelisk, which ideally they would actually pinch from an Egyptian temple to the sun god. And the obelisk is like a solid version of a sunbeam. Now, and in Egyptian temples, generally speaking, you would have a gold cap in it to catch the light, and it'd be much higher than the cones. So we would expect, in the middle of our central barrier, if we got it right, to find the base of a foundation of a big structure in the middle. And lo and behold, there was a foundation. And the climax of all this is we needed to go back to the very end of it, where the starting gates were, and see if we could actually find the starting gates and uncover them. And we did, and we found, as the model predicted, 8 starting gates all in a row under the garden of the Sergeant's Mess. You've got to visualise them there. You would have had a chariot and a charioteer, and they'd all be facing in that direction. And in the middle here, in the very middle, there would have been an entrance into the arena with a little box above it. And in that box there would have been referred to as the presiding magistrate. He would start the race. He probably paid for the race. And when he dropped a napkin, a white napkin, that was a signal for the gates to be opened, and they would fly open and they'd all take off. And they'd all take off in that direction. Now the circus itself extends about a quarter of a mile from this point off in that direction. And the central barrier takes up the far 2/3 of it. So they'd race to the near turning post. That's the one where we uncovered part of that massive cone. And then they'd go around the central barrier 7.5 times. So that the whole race would be about 2.5 miles long and probably last about 5 minutes. The charioteers themselves raced, although they raced individually, they did race as part of a team. And generally you would have 4 teams, factions they were called, and the factions would have their own followers. In our circus we would reckon 15,000 people could be there watching these races. They would last at least one day. There might be several, a sequence of days with races each day. It might be to celebrate the Emperor's birthday, or it might be a day in honour of a particular god or goddess. It would be a religious festival. Before it started, there would be a massive procession, probably from the Temple of Claudius in the town centre. And at the procession would be the presiding magistrate. He'd be up the front, and they'd bring cult objects from the temple in a special cart to the head of this procession, which would go through the town and go around and do a circuit and end up in the circus. And there would be a little platform somewhere in the middle where these cult objects would be laid out. So fundamentally, like so much that happened in the Roman period, it's got religious undertones. But the reason why people were there was A, it was free, and B, it would have been very exciting to watch. It also is important because it emphasises what maybe was in doubt, is that Britain in the Roman period was just as Romanised as in Rome itself. Colchester was a full works Roman city, and what we found here is an A1 triple star archaeological discovery. That's what it is. It's an A1 triple star archaeological discovery. It's a fantastic gift, and it's a gift that we really must do something with.